This video is for the discounts and tax and tip section of the Applying Percents to Real World Situations foldable. So in a separate video, you're going to be filling in the notes for commission and also for calculating markup, which is on a separate piece of paper. But for this one, we're going to flip to the discounts section. We're going to start up here at the top. So you're experienced shoppers. You deal with discounts all the time, so this shouldn't be too much new information. We're going to calculate the discount using a proportion. And to find the total cost, we always subtract the discount from the subtotal. So change to from. So the way we set up the proportion is always percent out of 100, and the amount of discount is how much you save out of the original price. The amount of discount is the part, the original price is the whole. So starting with this first example, in a department store, a $45 dress is marked 25% off. So $45 is the original price. So setting up our proportion, we have the percent, 25 over 100. We have the original price, which goes in the bottom portion of this ratio, $45. And we're trying to find the discount. The discount goes on the upper section of our proportion here. So that's X. We can solve this proportion a variety of ways, but the way that jumps out to me is 100 divided by 4 equals 25. So if we have a direct relationship there with a whole number, that's probably the easiest way to solve this. So if we're dividing by 4 on the left, then we divide by 4 on the right. And 45 divided by 4 is 11.25. Another way to do that would be to go from 100 to 45. You have to multiply by 45 hundredths. And so we would do the same thing on the top. If you have other ways to solve that proportion, that's fine too, but you do need to set up the proportion this way. So if X equals 11.25, we have to look back at what X represents. X represents the amount of discount, so the discount is $11.25. Remember, if it doesn't come out to a number in the hundredths place, we need to have a 0 there. So if it was 11.2, we'd say the discount is $11.20. If the decimal continues on going after the hundredths place, then we would need to round to the hundredths place because we're talking about money. On the second example, we have a shirt that has a ticket price of $14.50. That's the original cost. Courtney used a coupon and got a discount of $2.90. What is the discount rate of Courtney's coupon? That means that we don't know the percent. We don't know the percent, but we do know the amount of discount, and we do know the total price. So I don't know an obvious connection between $2.90 and $14.50. I can use a calculator to figure that out. It's 5. So that means that I can multiply $2.90 times 5 to get $14.50. If I'm going in the other direction, that means I need to do the inverse operation of multiplication, which is division. So I can divide by 5 to get my percent. 100 divided by 5 is 20. So I can figure out that way that it's 20. Another way you can solve this equation, and it is an equation. We have it set up in proportion form, but it still is an equation because X over 100 equals, that makes it an equation, $2.90 over $14.50. So another way to do that would be to figure out what $2.90 is when you divide it by $14.50, which is 2/10. So that would look like this. X equals 2/10, or X over 100 equals 2/10, and then we can multiply both sides by 100. And when you multiply 2/10 times 100, you get 20. Exactly what we got before. So now we need to look back at what X is representing. In this case, X is representing the percent of discount. So the discount is 20%. Moving on to the tax and tip flap, we're going to set up a proportion again. This time, instead of subtracting to get the subtracting when we're talking about discount, we're adding when we're talking about tax. We're adding when we're talking about tips. So we're going to use a proportion to calculate the tax, and to find the total cost, we're going to add the tax to the subtotal. So in this first question, a soccer team is having dinner at a restaurant, and the subtotal for the meal is $142. The subtotal is the price before tax. And the sales rate is 5%. How much will the team pay in sales tax? So we want to know the tax amount. The percentage of tax is 5%, so it's going to be 5 over 100. 142 is the price of the meal before tax, so it goes on the bottom here. And we don't know how much tax is going to be paid. One obvious connection is to divide both of those by 20, because 100 divided by 20 is 5. And that comes out to 7.1. We're talking about money here because 7.1 is the amount paid in tax. So we have to write that as tax is, can't put 7.1 because that doesn't look like money. We have to go out to the hundredths place, $7.10. On the next one, I'm going to show you two different ways to answer this question. So I want you to draw a line down the center here so that you can separate those into two sides. So on the first one, Tara's buying a new pair of jeans that cost $60.50. That is the price before tax. If the sales tax rate is 8%, what is the total cost? So we don't know the total cost. We do know the cost of the jeans by themselves, and we do know the 8% tax. So start with 8%. We don't know the tax amount. We do know the cost, not including the tax. So there is not a whole number that I can multiply 8 by to get 100 or 100 by to get 8. So I can divide to figure out what that number would be. 8 divided by 100 is 0.8. I can multiply 100 times 0.8 to get to 8. You can also divide by 12.5. There are some other things that you can do, but we will just do it this way. And when you solve for x, that is 4.84. What that tells us is the amount of tax is $4.84, but you have to be careful here because the answer to this question is not $4.84, because it says what is the total cost that Tara will pay for the jeans. So we have to add $60.50 to the tax $4.84, to get $65.34 total. And that is the answer to the question. The other way to solve this problem is to, instead of adding the tax at the end, add the tax rate at the beginning. So if you buy the jeans, you have to pay 100% of that cost. The jeans cost $60.50, so we're going to have to pay all of that, but we're also going to have to pay the 8% tax. So together, we're paying 108% of the price of those jeans. So this side is the percent. We still know the price of the jeans by themselves, but this time, if you have included the tax already, the cost of the jeans plus the tax, this variable represents the total cost, whereas on the original way that we solved this, the x represents the tax. So when you solve this way, x equals 65.34, which means that the total, because our variable represents the total cost, is $65.34. So some people prefer to go ahead and put the tax rate at the beginning rather than taking care of it at the end. And for the last one, the amount of calculating tips, we're going to take the amount of tip over the subtotal, and the subtotal again is the price for tip. Sometimes people calculate their tips including the tax amount. We're going to simplify this situation and just calculate the tips based on the subtotal, which is the price before the tip and the price before the tax. So just for the food and drink, if you're at a restaurant, or the service that whoever you're tipping is providing. So to calculate the tip, we're going to use a proportion, and to find the total cost, we need to add the tip to the subtotal. So a typical tip is 15% of the total bill, and if the bill is $142, how much money should be given for the tip? So we just want the tip price, cost. 15%. The total bill before the tip is $142. We don't know the tip. So you could solve that proportion any way you want. Like, for example, you could multiply 100 times 1.42. If you're not sure what that number would be, of course, you can divide using your calculator to figure that out. That's one way. When you do that, x equals 21.3. Again, we're talking about money. So when we say the tip is $21 and we have to add a 0 to go out to the hundredths place, $21.30. The last one, we're going to solve it two ways again, so we can draw that line down the center to divide. Jordan went to the barber. His cost of his haircut was $16, and he tipped the barber 20%. This time, it's not asking for the amount of tip, it's how much did Jordan spend in all, so we want the total. So the first way is just to find out what the tip amount would be. 20% of $16 is some number. We could divide both sides by 5, is an obvious connection there. So x equals 3.2. Remember, in this case, x represents the amount of tip, so the tip is $3.20. But we're not finished here because it's how much did Jordan spend in all. So it'd be $16 for the haircut plus $3.20 for the tip is $19.20 total. The other way to do this is like we did up here with including the percent of tax at the beginning, but this time we're going to be including the 20% tip. So if you get a haircut you're going to have to pay 100% of the cost plus the 20% tip. So that amount is $120. Our price before the tip is still $16, but this time the variable represents the total because we have included the tip percent in our original proportion. So when you solve that, you can multiply both sides by 1.2 is one way to do it. And x, the value of x, is 19.2. Remember that this time the variable represents the total, so we don't have to add anything now because we've already added it in our original proportion. The total spent is 19.2, but since this is money, we go out to the hundredths place, $19.20. You will have a separate video to watch for the commission and for calculating markup. Be sure to see the instructions for which pages to put these on in your notebook.